Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, I'm hoping to introduce all of you to something new that maybe you've been watching, usually a new TV series, usually covering something week to week, and usually with a co-host. Later in this episode, Sona and I are actually discussing a movie, Echo Valley, shot right on the outskirts of New Jersey here, written by Brad Inglesby. The very first show Sona and I ever discussed here on the podcast was Mayor of Easttown, written by Brad Inglesby, and HBO has a new series from the same creator, Task, also set in the outskirts of Philadelphia, just like Mayor of Easttown and just like this film, although it was shot here in New Jersey. And we will definitely be discussing Task here on the podcast, one of our week-to-week coverages coming in September when that show premieres. But in the meantime, Inglesby has also written this film for Apple TV Plus, starring Julianne Moore and Sydney Sweeney, a psychological thriller about the relationship between a mother and her drug-addicted daughter and the extremes she needs to go to protect her. An intriguing premise for sure, and intersecting with a few conversations we've had here on the podcast in the past. How successful was this? How entertaining is it? That all remains to be seen. Before then, I would like to check in, now 7 episodes I believe, into 8 as of this week, Poker Face. And for such a light and frothy show, there's quite a lot to say about this intriguing show and the direction it's gone in the past few episodes. Some quick show notes. First of all, if you'd like to reach out to us, of course, always, we love your feedback. needssomeintroduction@gmail.com. Like Poker Face, a show that on the surface that is very light, but maybe has something deeper and more interesting going on beneath the surface, reach out to us and provide your favorite examples of such a show. It could be something popular or it could be something more obscure. I'd love to find other similar shows, and I'll shout them out here on the podcast. Later in the week, Darren and I have rewatched the 28 movies, 28 days later, 28 weeks later, and we will be discussing them this weekend in anticipation of next week, the arrival of 28 years later, the highly anticipated and very buzzy Legacy sequel. I mean, it's well over 20 years now, 25 years, I believe, since the most recent sequel to that series. And apparently the reputation of the film has grown over time because it will probably have a bigger opening weekend than the entire gross of the 28 Days Later film. In that same conversation, we will probably be discussing Danny Boyle's career as well. I've just been catching up on my blind spots of Danny Boyle's most recent films, and that'll be our next episode. In the near future, less than 2 weeks away now, The Bear is coming back for its final season, and expect multiple episodes there where I break down the current season like I have in previous seasons. Check out the backlog for those earlier episodes if you haven't. And a subsequent conversation with Sona, who will also be binging this final season of the show. Plus next week, expect a solo episode from me where I check in on a bunch of these summer shows that are at mid-season, checking in with them. How are they doing at this point? And also a bunch of new premieres that I'll be checking out. Curious to see whether some of these midsummer, the very weak slate here in June, I have to say. But I'll be sampling some shows to see if maybe, just maybe, some of these will be worth the watch. All of that is coming in the next couple of weeks. But without further delay, let's get into a review and analysis of this current season of Poker Face up through episode 8. Poker Face was created by Rian Johnson, famous for the Knives Out films, a third one coming this year, and the film Brick. And for those familiar with his films, you know that he likes a twisty plot, murder mysteries in general. Of course, his biggest box office success, the contentious The Last Jedi Star Wars film. But this one seems much more in line with most of his other films, this series, in that it is some subversion or inversion of a detective story. He wrote and created this show very much to fit Natasha Leon. I don't know if they're friends outside of work, but I can't imagine that having a show that very much is in line with a series like Columbo, in which we see the murder before we see the investigator arrive, had to be influenced by him watching Russian Doll on Netflix. Another show I recommend, especially season 1. If you haven't seen that show, Natasha Leon is stuck in a time loop. She dies and then has to solve why she died and avoid her death and also try to figure out why is she stuck in this time loop. And she wears a trench coat and very much channels the Peter Falk Columbo character. And I can't imagine that Johnson didn't see that, and maybe that becomes the springboard of making a Columbo-like series and centering it around Natasha Leon. For those of you who are not familiar with this series, which is available on Peacock, by the way, not a very popular streaming service, but when Peacock did launch, this was one of their first projects and a big success for them. The series ratings continue to be strong, but I'm not sure it is as much of a buzzy series as it was the first time around. And if that's the case, that's a little unfortunate because I think the show has only gotten better, in my opinion. But the central premise is that Leon's character, Charlie, is on the run from the mob. She's been framed for a murder, which is all outlined in a truly excellent pilot episode of this series, which I believe is still available for free on Peacock. So do check out the pilot if nothing else. But the very cool premise that she basically has a nearly supernatural ability of knowing when someone is lying. It's explained actually in this very episode, the current week's episode, an excellent, truly excellent episode of the show, maybe the best episode they've ever had. And this is, I just said that about last week's episode. I'm now saying it about this week's episode. So the show is only improving. But in this very week's episode, there is a con man who basically says, what you're actually doing is you're able to see everybody's tells. Some people can usually tell, I can tell someone's lying when they do this one thing. Charlie apparently is so good identifying everybody's possible tells that she immediately, like a human lie detector, can know when someone is lying or not. We do hear a challenge in this very week's episode, by the way, that maybe, just possibly, the biggest sociopath in the world would be able to pull the wool over her eyes, and maybe she will someday encounter that character. But that is not who she's encountering here, and I'll get into that. But one of the most fascinating things about this show, and a deeper read of it, is the empathy that's expressed here towards everybody, towards the villains and the victims both, and how they really are not purely villainous or purely heroic. They are very flawed people, usually at the end of their ropes. And the entire structure of the show is that she can tell when someone's lying to her, anybody, even if she's just met them for the very first time. And inevitably, she catches somebody in a lie and she can't let it go. She has to keep digging. Why are they lying? Why are they lying? And maybe she does this just day to day on casual instances. But of course, in these particular episodes, it's always relating to a murder, or nearly relating to a murder. In season 2 of the show, this mob premise that she's on the run from the mob was wrapped up in the very first 3 episodes. So the initial premiere of this particular season of the show had 3 episodes made available at once. The very first one written and directed by Rian Johnson and starring Cynthia Erivo playing many different characters, I think quintuplets, I believe, who had been famous for a children's program in her youth, but had had their money, the royalties from their show, funneled to their controlling, domineering mother. And in that episode, hilariously, we see the mob is in hot pursuit, oftentimes just feet behind her throughout the course of that episode. And by episode 3, the mob storyline has been fully wrapped up. Without spoiling things here, just is to say that featuring many famous guest stars, every single episode has many guest stars, famous guest stars. And episode 3, with Rhea Perlman as the mob boss, Richard Kind as her kindly husband, and John Mulaney as a very shady FBI agent. The mob storyline was wrapped up, and this allowed Charlie to be basically freed from the premise of the show. And this actually concerned me. I really did enjoy the mob elements of season 1, and I was wondering how they can continue to expand that as maybe these... I had envisioned, actually, in my review of season 1, that maybe one set of mobsters use her abilities for their gang war against another set of mobsters who's lying, and she becomes this useful asset, and maybe she needs to be on the run again because these different factions are all interested in her. But maybe that just makes the show too much about that, and that probably is the case. But then they reset the show at that point, and I did worry, especially when you see episode 4 and episode 5 maybe on the weaker side of these shows. I still enjoyed them, by the way. I know episode 4, the one with the alligator, if you guys have seen it, that episode has a pretty negative opinion from most fans. I thought it was fine, not up to the standards of the show in general, but it was okay. But the next episode about the minor league baseball team, I thought was actually a pretty strong episode, even though it couldn't quite nail the landing. But now for 3 weeks in a row, the show has broken format more and more, and in really intriguing ways shows just the great bones that this show has to potentially run for a very long time. And part of that is making Leon's character a little less central to the plot itself. By removing her running away from the mob as such another aspect to a running plot line throughout all these shows, what the show's actually allowed itself to become now is to spend a lot more time in the setup of the crime. Anybody who's familiar with Columbo in the past, usually the murder will happen pretty quickly, will be revealed very early in the episode, and then Columbo shows up and begins an investigation. And so much of the show is about Columbo and his investigation and questioning this person and that person. And of course, that was the format for season 1 of this show as well. And that was very entertaining. But what this has allowed the show to become now is where oftentimes Leon's character, Charlie, doesn't even show up until midway, maybe more than midway through the show. And instead what we see, is a lot of setup of the actual crime, but the reasons for the crime. And this is what I want to get to, where this show is very sneakily about something. Of course, you can just watch the entertaining, each time a new outlandish milieu, oftentimes, and watch these characters commit these crimes, and then Charlie unravel it by being able to decipher who is lying and who's not. And the show still has a lot of fun, even with that premise. And this will be very light spoilers, by the way, in case you haven't caught up. I'm trying to pitch this to you overall. But if you want to go in blind at this point, go ahead and watch the shows. But just to be clear, if you continue to listen, I am not going to give away any of the big twists or even who the killer is in these particular episodes. Maybe just the premise of each episode and the cultural context. The show does continue to have fun with Charlie's powers. There have been instances, even in this very season, where people don't even know she has this power. There was very cleverly in season 1, there are times when the criminal will discover Charlie's ability, and from that moment on, their interactions change because now they're aware that she has this ability, and they have to answer her questions without raising her suspicion, but then avoid saying the thing that would incriminate them. And in this season, there's already been a number of times when she's basically asking the right question to the killer, and the killer does not give themselves away, not because they know about her abilities, but simply because of the way they answer the question. So it continues to evolve, this very clever way they use her abilities and the limitations of her abilities, and how sometimes she could be wrong about her abilities because of the way that someone chooses to answer a question. And all of that is a lot of fun. This is just a very fun show. It's very well made. Beautifully, even the font, everything is so thought out. The show itself, obviously a throwback to the Rockford Files or Columbo, very much Columbo, all detective series from the 1970s that are very much procedurals. You can watch an episode here, skip a whole year of the show, tune back in, and if you know the premise, you can follow along. And if you feel like just checking in with Poker Face and just seeing the 3 or 4 or 5 episodes that everybody's buzzing about, you can totally do that. There is absolutely no reason to watch all of the shows, and it's such a relief in a way to see a traditional, procedural, old school style TV. Maybe I was such a big fan, and even to a large extent, the whole purpose of this podcast is to be able to talk about a week-to-week experience of watching one of these prestige series and really processing and digesting it and discussing it and speculating between these episodes. But there's something really relaxing about watching a series that you can just dip into, skip a whole episode, just watch your favorites, rewatch your favorites, watch them in any order. There's something very relaxing about that type of TV, which of course is just old school television. And of course, not only is that stylistically a throwback to that time, but visually also. This is shot digitally, but made to look very much using some proprietary software, have the look and feel of the TV shows from that period. And it's in the styling of the characters. It's in the cultural references that Charlie makes, always referencing personalities and movies from the 70s and early 80s. As I mentioned, the font, that mustard yellow font, is exactly the Columbo font. And yet the show is not putting the constraint that there have to be set in the 70s. Honestly, there's a show on right now on HBO Max trying to do exactly the same thing, called Duster, trying to wink at this style of show from the 70s, and is set in the 70s and feels so artificial because it is so obviously not true to the time period it's set in. Ironically, Poker Face is set in the current time, but is referencing this old style culturally and visually. And all of this could just be a pose or an homage at best. But here's where I want to talk about this show, not only in how clever it's been in the past few weeks, not only in how clever it is in its imitation of an old style. This show is subversively about empathy. You could argue that Charlie herself is able to see when people are lying because of perhaps some innate strong empathy. And it's very important, I think, in the show that most of the time when Charlie is catching the bad guy, it's not because she identifies this bad guy as trying to catch him or that her friend has been murdered and she's trying to solve the crime. That definitely has been the case in the past. But frequently, especially in this current season, she is actually empathizing with the perpetrator. She's befriended the perpetrator. That's how she got close. That's how she discovered the lie in the first place. And it's not just Charlie. The show itself has a real empathy for both perpetrator and victim. And here's the clever thing about it. The show is not set in some palatial estate somewhere. This is not White Lotus. It is the exact opposite of White Lotus. Part of the reason that the aesthetics of the show set in the 70s or have that look, even though the show itself is set in contemporary times, is because the show itself is set in these places. Initially for season 1, it was because Charlie's trying to keep a low profile so she won't get caught. So she's not hanging out in big cities. She's not hanging out at casinos. She does not want to interact with these connected mob bosses. But that continues now because this is her people. She likes to hang out with working class, lower class people. And oftentimes, these people are killing each other because a brother doesn't want to continue to operate a business, for example, and the other brother requires this. So it is a real understanding that the reason that crimes are committed are oftentimes for relatively low stakes. But to these people, they are very high stakes because these people are on the edges of society. They are not millionaires. They are not rich and powerful. It is quite the opposite. These folks need this little bit of dignity, this little bit of, it could even just be a job, just this little thing that connects them to feeling like part of society. And losing that literally turns them to murder. So in a very subtle way, it is a damning indictment of these places that oftentimes feel like you are traveling back in time because they've been left behind culturally by the changes of the culture around them. And then the actual motivations for the crimes are relatively petty. And especially in season 2, it's not even money oftentimes that is the real driver of the murders. There is a real morality at play. A question of, for example, in that alligator episode, which I think is a little slept on, I think it's a little bit better than people give it credit for. When you think about the subtext of someone who is a good police officer, someone who is excelling at their job, but do not get the credit they believe they deserve because somebody simply is getting all the accolades and attention because they are on social media. They just have a higher profile than they do. And how someone who, something like that doesn't matter to them, how it begins to warp their opinion of themselves, how it begins to turn them into petty and even murderous people. And the show is shining a light on these particular locales, these forgotten corners of the country. And even very subtly, very interestingly, it actually gets into the struggles of these people within this context. It's not just setting it in that location. You get a little bit of feel of like, what is it like to struggle to have a minor league baseball team or to be an athlete who once had a lucrative contract and now you've lost that, or had some kind of social media presence, or had been a successful actor or actress at some point and then lost your job, or in season 1 had been one of the most famous special effects artists, but then the technology changed. You're not needed anymore, and how you've like lost your status. So it is not just setting these stories in these different contexts. It is actually researched. It is actually showing you a little glimpse of what it is like to live in these different milieus. And the extra space that removing that pursuit storyline has given the show has allowed all of that to breathe. And it's really become a truly excellent show. In the past 3 weeks specifically, I want to circle back to those. So now 3 weeks ago, we have the episode Sloppy Joseph, in which we have a child as our first murderess. And you're like, wow, did they really have a kid be a murderer? Well, yes and no. You'll have to watch the show. And we have this fantastic character, this young actress, playing a Tracy Flick in the making, obsessed with having the most stars in her class. And even here, it seems to be a little bit of a cultural message about the way we train our kids to be such people pleasers and the metrics we have them measure themselves by could be toxic, and to say the least, in this show. But this is a very funny episode, very entertaining. And this young actress does a great job of playing this really demented and reward-focused, truly a sociopath. But then things got even better in the following episode called One Last Job. And again, think about the setting for this. We have two best friends who work in basically Best Buy, played by Sam Richardson and Corey Hawkins. And Sam Richardson is a huge fan of heist movies, as am I, by the way, and has written a script in which an heist is executed within a Best Buy. And as you would expect, that script eventually gets executed over the course of the episode itself. So there's this really fascinating commentary here, especially if you are a fan, if you've ever fantasized of writing a script of a movie, it's all here. And of course, it's not only a heist movie, it's also a rom-com, because there's another character here in the episode who loves rom-coms, and she is trying to skew the story, drive it in the direction of a rom-com, where, of course, it wants to be a heist movie, and there's this little tension here between the two things. Very clever, very smart, really beautifully executed. And as soon as you finish that movie, you're going to want to watch the movie Heat. And you'll know why when you watch that movie. But yeah, I had to watch Heat after I saw that episode. But all of that seemed to just be setting up this week's episode, The Sleazy Georgian, with two big guest stars here, Melanie Lynskey and John Cho. And if you are a fan of David Mamet's con men plays and movies, The Spanish Prisoner, obviously a direct homage in the title here, The Sleazy Georgian, but maybe more so his movie House of Cards, which similarly has a con man bringing a supposed naive character in to their con and how things unravel from that point on, which I will not spoil here, but I will just let you know that anybody, if you have a Peacock subscription and you understand the premise of the show, you don't even need to know anything about the outcome of that mob subplot, etc. Just watch this episode. It is so clever, especially if you're a fan, obviously, of those Mamet plays. Just like those plays and movies, trying to suss out, where does the con end? Where does reality start? Where does it end? Who's being conned? Who's in on it? Who's not in on it? Who thinks they're in on it but are actually getting conned? This is really a perfect episode of show and a total blast. So all that is to say, here's a show that I've already been a fan of, a casual watch for me, but definitely always recommended. That now 3 weeks ago, I was like, that might be the best or one of the best episodes this show has ever had. And then last week I was like, well, for me, I think that's my favorite episode ever. But now this week I'm like, this is definitely the best episode probably that this show has ever had, other than maybe the pilot. And I honestly cannot wait for the rest of this season. 4 more episodes. Where will Charlie turn up next week? What new microculture of America will she be examining? Will we be examining through her eyes? What menial job will she be doing? A forgotten job that we never think about how the sausage is made. That's all she's doing, making sausage on these episodes, whether she's a farm worker, whether she's doing back office work at a minor league baseball club, whether she's a janitorial assistant. What subculture of this country will she be interacting with? And of course, most importantly, what movie genres or subgenres will we be mashing together into the subsequent episodes? Rian Johnson coming back and writing episode 11, directed by Ty West. So presumably that is going to be another highlight of the season. Once again, everybody, that is Poker Face on Peacock. They really should rerun this on NBC during the summer if they haven't already before. And let's hope the next season of the show does not take another 2.5 years to produce. Okay, let's get to my conversation with Sona about the new Apple TV Plus psychological thriller, Echo Valley. Okay, Sona. Hello. How's your week? So we are looking for something new to watch on the podcast. A couple of things. I think we will almost certainly, I think this is going to be the plan, by the way, Sona, for you too. We
Thanks
are going
for letting me know.
yeah, like cluing you in right now. I think we're going to start watching Smoke on the 27th. I probably will be doing that with Darren, because we have nothing to cover until the Alien Earth show comes in August. Is Joel going to watch Alien Earth? Have you heard about this at all? Is he curious about it? Have you heard anything?
I have not heard about it either from media or from him. So
Okay, well then he may know, but anyway, the trailer just dropped last week, and this is probably going to be a very big deal. This is from Noah Hawley, by the way, who does the Fargo shows.
okay.
So an interesting combination of things. but we will be covering that in August. Before then, right up until then, we'll have the smoke show, smoke show, and then you and I, Sona, I think we will be covering the Dexter Resurrection series. Is it called Resurrection? Resurrections?
I don't know, but I know what you mean, and I'm looking forward to it.
The new Dexter series. That's what
Yeah,
we're
the
watching.
new Dexter.
Based on the trailer for that show, I was really not looking forward to the show because I'm like, what could they possibly do with this premise? But it looks like he's moving to New York, first of all, which is intriguing to see Dexter in New York. I guess a good place to hide for a serial killer. But apparently he is a known commodity and there is a collector of serial killers and he gets to meet a lot of other serial killers and they hang out together. And from the trailer, it looks like some of these serial killers include Kristen Ritter and Neil Patrick Harris.
Nice.
Just to name two, very recognizable.
Very interesting.
And the collector is Peter Dinklage. So that is going to be an all-star cast. So they brought a lot of very famous people into this show. I wouldn't be surprised if the victims are also famous guest stars. Kind of the opposite of Poker Face. And so curious to see that. And that will be what we'll be covering. And of course, Sona, in between then, we have The Bear coming back in less than 2 weeks. And we'll definitely be discussing that here on the show as well. So in the spirit of that, we've been looking for stuff to cover here on the show to keep the schedule full until the big signature shows start to pop up on the calendar again. And what I noticed on our calendar was, of course, this show on Apple TV Plus, pretty high profile show, I should say, movie, Echo Valley, which of course stars Julianne Moore and Sydney Sweeney. Questionable as to whether it stars Sydney Sweeney.
Yeah, it's also funny that you misspoke for a second and said TV show because I was convinced this was a TV show and absolutely shocked when I saw the running time of 1 hour and 45 minutes.
But no, just the movie. So a relatively short watch, about 1.5 hours long. And a couple of reasons that I gravitated to it. Not only that you like psychological thrillers, here we go. They're relatively rare nowadays. They used to be so commonplace. And here is a psychological thriller with a very talented and famous young actress. Of course, Julianne Moore, one of the most famous actresses of our generation. She's not in our generation, I guess. I don't think so. I mean, I'm saying that, of our lifetime.
She's a little bit older, but I'll include her. I love her.
I mean, we've seen her this whole entire time. Yes. And of course, with other recognizable characters here, Domhnall Gleeson here. We had him in The Patient. He's been in other things we've covered here in the podcast as well. The Patient, most notably. Here he is again as this villainous character. Kyle MacLachlan shows up for one scene. I think just one scene. That's insane. Fiona Shaw from Andor is here as well as her best friend.
And from Killing Eve, right?
Oh, yes, of course. Yes.
Loved her in Killing Eve.
And most importantly, behind the scenes, we have Brad Inglesby, of course, who is the showrunner, was the showrunner for Mare of Easttown, which is like the inception point for this podcast practically, and was also the showrunner for the upcoming HBO series Task, which we will definitely be covering here on the podcast. Also another crime thriller, also set in Pennsylvania. All of this DNA all merging together seemed like a good fit for us. Oh, and for me personally, this film is directed by Michael Pearce, who wrote and directed a small British film about 5 years ago called Beast, which starred Jessie Buckley and really was the beginning of her ascension to stardom. And she's incredible in that. It is a murder mystery. It has elements of fairy tale to it also. It is very deep psychological. And I think it's just available now again recently to stream on Hulu, I believe. And it's also on Pluto. It's on a lot of places. But anyway, look at Beast. It's pop. If you do search for it, there's a lot of movies with that title. It's the one that stars Jessie Buckley. She's incredible in it. It's an incredible movie. And all that is to say, everybody, you really should watch Beast this week. Because Echo Valley for me was just okay. Just okay.
Interesting.
But well, Sona, what did you think? What did you think?
First, I want to say I love that you included set in Pennsylvania as one of the criteria of being in our wheelhouse. I didn't know we had this fondness for Pennsylvania, but maybe we do. The movie overall, I really enjoyed it. I went into it knowing very little, which is actually my preferred way to
Yeah.
experience any kind of media. But I was surprised, pleasantly surprised at how much this isn't a murder mystery and
Yeah.
is about parenting.
Yes, very much so. I mean, that will be, we're going to be spoiler free here at first, everybody. And then we are going to spoil the movie but I'll let you know when that's going to happen. But just briefly, I think might be a limitation of the film. I wish it had been a little bit more about parenting, but I do agree. I think like the first half of this film works really, really well when it's less of a thriller. But the basic premise of the film is that Julianne Moore plays this mom, and she has a contentious relationship with her daughter. Seems like they had a very warm relationship when they were younger. She works on a horse farm in Pennsylvania, actually shot here in New Jersey, but basically they're just on the opposite side of the river. So other than changing the camera position, you're basically shooting the same terrain. And this relationship with the daughter has become contentious, mostly because she's become an opioid addict, and she has just at the beginning of the movie has just left rehab yet again, is fallen back in with her boyfriend, who's a facilitator for this addiction, but seems to be a real troublemaker. And as you would expect with these type of relationships, shows up at the mom's door needing help once again. But one night she comes home and there's some blood on her shirt, and it's not her blood. And then mom needs to spring into action to protect her daughter without getting into details yet. But so what did you think about this dynamic that is set up here? I think Julianne Moore does a great job, really great job. One of the main reasons to watch this for sure, as usually is the case with her performances.
Yeah, I actually am really interested in your perspective of this because for me, having someone in my family with an addiction issue, in my case, alcoholism, this hit very close to home. And even though the dynamic was different, not a parent-child dynamic, well, I guess a parent-child dynamic, but not in this way, it was very gut-wrenching to watch. But I wondered if it would resonate the same way for someone that, as far as I know, and I think we know each other fairly well, hasn't had that experience.
Oh, interesting point. Yeah, I would say that it probably didn't hit me on a personal level, but I do think the strongest moments in the movie, for sure, is, for example, a scene relatively early in the film, definitely the first half hour of the film, when the daughter is relapsing here and desperate.
Yeah.
And it starts to manipulate the mother in every way possible all at once. So she's, leaning on her, begging her for help, telling her she's in trouble, threatening the dog, tearing her hair out. It's every possible manipulation all at once is so transparent, but really powerful. And I thought that's a version of the movie that really worked really well. I would say, like, as the plot starts to kick in, it's more like the structure of the film that I start to have issues with.
I understand that. Yeah,
but there are excellent parts here. We can outline it. I think I have a lot more things to say, but I think I would spoil things, so I'll bite my tongue a little bit. But I would say yes. I think that what you're outlining there, I think that is the strongest part of the
and there is something more I can say about that without spoiling anything.
Sure.
I feel like Julianne Moore did such a beautiful job of conveying the conflict of loving someone in this situation where when you love someone so much, all you want to do is fix it for them. And it is very well known that nobody can fix an addiction except the addict themselves.
Yeah.
And the idea of introducing a parental dynamic into that, where it's kind of, you feel like it's your job as a parent to make things easier for your child, to help your child, to do the right thing by your child. And the conflict of understanding how to do that, especially when she talks with Kyle MacLachlan, Claire's father, who's taken the, cold turkey kind of approach of like, unless you get clean, I want nothing to do with you. And seeing the contrast of that and thinking about the strength it would take or the coldness, depending on the type of person you are, as a parent to know that your child is in that situation and leave them to their own devices. I just think it gave me a lot to think about.
Yeah, I think that the first half of the film is really the strongest aspect to it. And just the visual representation that you described, it's not only that she's at the end of her rope and she has to be tough with her daughter sometimes, and she is tough with her, but then she also is obviously still willing to work on it, unlike the dad. And there's that voice message, which we can circle back to later as well, because it's kind of like a button on the film to some extent as well. But even just early on, where you see the routine, right? Like when the daughter's there and then she has this reconnection with her and they like cuddle with each other and you see that warmth, but then the daughter disappears again and she goes back into a routine. We see the same thing over and over again. She wakes up, she sees the water stain on the roof, that she can't afford to fix. And her daughter is just another, she's basically spent any extra capital that's in the farm to bail her daughter out and maybe pay for rehab, etc. And just that additional financial strain, of course. And she's also dealing with recently having lost her lover, her or wife, I guess they were actually married, in earlier or recently, and how that is she is basically in this emotional funk. And you see that in the repetition of the imagery of her staring at the ceiling. You see her feet touch the ground every day, and like it's just that routine that she's in. And then of course the disruption when her daughter arrives, but then she goes back into her routine again. So it's just really interesting, like you said. It just kind of gives you this kind of access into where her headspace is, and she does a great job. Absolutely, I think she's terrific.
Yeah, she's amazing here.
And she, for me, she rescues the film because she is in every scene. I mean, she's definitely our POV character, but she may be in every single scene of the film. So it's a pretty amazing performance. Do you have anything else you want to say before you go to the spoilers? I would recommend the film, especially if any of these ingredients sound interesting to you. Even though it's uneven, it overall, I think, is a good film and well made.
I agree.
I have mostly problems, interestingly, with the script, I think. And I do wonder if this was supposed to be, I think this, I never say this. I'm like, watch Department Q. And I'm like, this is going to be a great template for multiple seasons of this show if they decide to do it. This is a Netflix series, Department Q I'm talking about here. But it all needed to be 2 or 3 episodes shorter. I'm going to say the exact opposite here. Here's a movie that a lot of these things, like the development of the relationship between the mother and daughter, maybe flashbacks to their relationship before the addiction, maybe a side episode where we see where the daughter's mindset is at, maybe even more development of this great villain character. This needed to be 4 or 5 episodes, and it feels really rushed into a 1.5 hour movie, or barely over an hour and a half.
Yeah, I mean, that's a short movie, even by today's standards. And while I generally really appreciate a short movie, I've said that before, here I understand your point that there could have been a lot more exposition. I will say that exposition might have been gut-wrenching. So the emotional side of me is a little bit relieved we didn't do a deeper dive into that.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. I guess because that's an interesting perspective as well. I guess it depends on how intimately you take this material, because I took it a little bit more, more as a movie and like not having that personal
and I probably expanded it to include all my personal experiences with addiction, and it triggered those painful memories in me. And so I didn't want to relive them any more than I already have.
Wow. Okay. That's very interesting to have that different perspective. But even without it, I would say, yeah, I recommend it. I think you seem to have been even more enthusiastic about this.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I really did. And also, one more thing without spoilers. I give Sydney Sweeney credit. She's widely considered one of the most beautiful actresses in Hollywood today, but not so much here. I give her credit for going, without makeup and showing blemishes in her skin and all of that.
Yeah, she actually makes a career of that in some ways. Even in like Euphoria, she allows herself to be, where she can be very glammed up at times in that show. But there are times when she shows herself in like the most unattractive light possible. So it's kind of courageous of her to do that. And also now she's just the movie she's working on right now. She's playing true story of a boxer.
Oh,
And she, is, I think she has like a broken nose and bruised eyes. So she, not no vanity there. Hopefully not. Oh, and one more thing I want to mention for folks who did check out the beginning of this film and then just I just want to say before we get into spoilers, I definitely want to get into spoilers, but I do want to say that I thought this had a very satisfying wrap up. What did you think?
very.
Yeah. I think that's another thing that sells it. It's like, kind of sitting there going like, where's this going? And you're like, oh, that was pretty good. So I do like the button on the episode, and I do think it gives you a satisfying wrap up. So if you start watching it and then you're on the fence, I'd say stick through it. I mean, it's an hour and a half. Come on, people.
Who doesn't have an extra hour and a half?
Right.
Me for the better sister, but that's a conversation another time.
Yeah, if we have time, maybe we talk about that for a few minutes. Okay, so full spoilers, everybody. We're going to spoil the movie now. So just to kind of get into it a little bit at a time. So beyond that point, there's blood on the daughter's shirt. The mom is concerned, obviously. Is it her blood? No. And so she has a story. This is her boyfriend's blood. She pushed him. She shoved him. Oh, you should call the police. Maybe he's still okay. No, his head bashed open. Okay, well, it's still an accident. You'll be okay. No, I did it. And then the mom immediately starts going like, okay, we got to come up with a contingency plan. Cause like, why was your phone at the house? But even before she sees the body, she has this full contingency plan, which seems like she's like a CIA operative or something, to be honest. This lady has
watched a lot of Law and Order.
She is like immediately thinking all the ways. I honestly thought there had to be some twist where she had committed a murder or something in her past, because she has thought about every possible, negative outcome here. Really thinking about everything. I mean, I don't know if that is supposed to represent how neurotic you can get when you're, maybe this, maybe the most generous way to read this is because the daughters had these problems. Maybe in her darkest fantasies, she's been thinking about something like this.
No, you don't assume your addict daughter is going to murder somebody.
Right? And then, of course, that's very questionable, but she has a plan immediately. And she's like, I'm going to take care of this, honey. I always take care of you. I'm going to take care of this.
Even she just jumps into action.
She does. And then this is where I'm like, what? Because then she goes and checks on the boyfriend's body, quote unquote, and goes and checks out the back of this car. And the boyfriend's body, who she accidentally killed, supposedly, although, maybe in the heat of the moment, smashed him in the head with a rock, whatever it was, crime of passion. You're expecting that she threw him in the car and maybe he died on the ride over to the mom's house or something.
And this even that, I was like, wow, she dragged him all the way to the car from camping. That would be exhausting. How did she find the strength to do this? So even when I thought we were just going to see the body in the car, I found it a little implausible. But yes, go ahead.
Right. So I agree. I was just like, oh, so now we have to explain how could she do this little woman who maybe knocked this guy in the head and rolled down a hill. And now she's dragged this guy up a hill, like a 175-pound guy. Like, what? And even that's questionable. But then it's really questionable when she opens the trunk and this guy is wrapped up like a bag and roped off.
A nice, neat job.
Exactly. Like this is like a professional person has wrapped up this body for disposal. And she doesn't raise enough questions here. I think she should ask her daughter a lot more questions.
Yeah, one of the biggest plot holes in this movie, and I had texted you about a couple of other smaller ones, but I mean, the way this body was wrapped up was somebody who knew what they were doing.
Oh, exactly.
And also, like, where did she get the plastic and the duct tape? I mean, that's not stuff people normally travel with. So a lot of questions that could have and should have been asked here.
And also the fact that not only this guy's all wrapped up, which is good because it's not like a plot hole. It actually turns out to be, context for the story. The plot hole is in her never questioning it at all. I mean,
Yes.
she obviously is surprised when she sees the body, so she has a reaction. But did she think her daughter did that? Like, she can't possibly have thought that her daughter, she must have, I would immediately, even if I just was in action, dump the body, I would immediately go back home and go like, who did you murder this person with? Because you did not do that by yourself, right? And she does not ask that question.
I guess the explanation is don't ask questions you don't want to know the answers to, but I don't know if I could resist asking that question.
She might also, to be generous here, she might also want to ask her that question, but the girl does take off one day later. So there's maybe not that much. Maybe she's just like, I'm going to wait till she's not completely traumatized, or, you know your daughter well enough, especially when she's in one of these states, that she's not going to answer my questions anyway. So let me wait until she's a little bit calmer and we have breakfast. And I'm like, look, you got to explain this to me. And guess what? She's gone at that point anyway. So maybe she would have asked these questions given enough time, possibly. I'll be generous and allow that. I still don't understand why she was ready to, she had a plan for disposing of a body instantly, like within minutes.
Insane.
I'm not sure.
Just really snapped right into action.
She's like, we're going to go to the lake. I'm going to get a boat. She's ready to go.
Where did she even get that boat from? Was that clear?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they live near the river, if they have a boat around.
Yeah, but then she rented one when she goes back later.
I mean, I have no idea how that works, but maybe she didn't want to use the same boat, or maybe you have to use a rental boat on that lake. I don't know. These are all questions. I don't know, but it is a good point. If she has a boat, why don't she just bring her own boat and just jump in the lake and not draw anyone's attention that she's right to the boat?
Back in 2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Where she's still out there looking for the body. So yeah, many questions. And this is the type of things that, by the way, this is where I thought like the script was the weakest part of this, that all these questions that I'm asking, like unnecessarily complicated.
Yeah, easily explained with just a sentence here, a sentence there.
Yeah, and
well,
even
I'm not sure about the body being wrapped up, but the rest.
yes. I mean, you could resolve the body being wrapped up. She could grab her daughter by the shoulders and be like, you have to explain this to me tomorrow. You did not do that on your own. And then the girl's gone the next morning. That's it. Yeah. You just need that 2 lines of sentence and the issue's resolved. And another place where also, like, she rents the boat and then she goes out on the lake, and then that's why they're like, oh, you've been out here for a while. That's why the cop shows up. First of all, you don't need the cop there at all. It could just be some random person who starts having a friendly conversation with her. And she's like, she sees bubbles in the water and she's like, oh my God, the body's going to pop up between us right now. Like, you could create suspense without having a cop there. But second of all, even if you want to have a cop there, you could just be like, hey, she's there, diving, and he rolls by on his boat. And then 2 hours later, he comes by and he's like, what's going on? Why are you still in the same spot this whole time? It could have been a much more natural progression. So a very odd set of choices, especially because, like you said, she has a boat. So why is she renting one?
Yeah, seems strange to me.
Maybe she thought she was just covering her own tracks to be like, oh, we're just going out for a paddle. And then that's why. And then, of course, it starts getting suspicious where she only stays in one place the whole time. But
yeah. And I think, just stepping outside the actual plot for a second, we were discussing a comment in connection with your friends and neighbors about whether maybe we are overanalyzing certain aspects of things. But for me, and maybe it's just the way my mind works, these are questions that arise while I'm watching the movie, and they begin to distract me. And so that's the reason I'm bringing it up. It's not because I think I'm trying to pick it apart. It's because that my mind naturally has that curiosity.
Right. Yeah, I feel the exact same way, especially, and same thing. I feel the same way when in general, when I'm nitpicking something, I am not nitpicking something because I'm watching something that everybody loves, and then I just looking for stuff to nitpick. For me, it's just like, for example, in a murder mystery, when I am looking for clues, I'm trying to see what you're trying to. I am trying, like, you are, as the writer of the show, as the creator of the story, you're not telling me, don't pay attention to this. Obviously, it requires that you be active, even if you are buying the thing that they are tricking you with. Like, I want you to see this, like a magic trick. Look over here, but actually, I'm doing this other thing over here. Right. Even if I'm not seeing the subtext, like the trick being played out, because sometimes we've seen on the show, on the podcast, I should say, where I'll guess what the ending's going to be or something. But I'm not even talking about that. I'm saying, like, what are you trying to, you're saying, pay attention to this. So I am paying attention to it. And as I pay attention to it, you're like, you do realize you're contradicting yourself at this moment, right? So I'm just pointing out the things that become like you said, become a distraction because you told me to look at it.
Exactly.
At least you do the same, at least be
right. Like they made it a plot point that she rented the boat and took it out for 2 hours, and then she wasn't back in time. So then where did that first boat come from?
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Don't draw my attention to this and then be like, you're not supposed to pay attention.
I was even thinking maybe she stole the boat from the rental when she went in the middle of the night, but don't they chain up the boats at night? Like my mind went through that whole thing.
Right. There's a lot of thought process there. I thought the same thing, by the way. Yeah, we were jumping towards the end, but it's like when you see her with the flashlight and all the boats there, and you're like, is she taking one of those boats? Because she has her own boat.
Yeah.
So anyway, just additional questions, unnecessary and unrelated to the plot. Anyway, so I did like, by the way, that she has the boat for whatever reasons. I do like the fact that they use that to show her dragging the body into, the question we have, going back to the point of like, how did this girl get this body into the car? Here's her mom, who works as a farmhand, basically, and probably has a lot of, strength from
party stock,
throwing, hay around, probably even like, doesn't matter if she goes to the gym as often as her daughter. There's very different between like working out and like picking objects off the ground and throwing animals around. It's a different set of coordination and strength. And all that's to say that her mom has it and has been doing it for decades. And she needs to like put this body onto this boat and then drag it onto, and this is apparently like her daughter just picked this guy up off the ground and threw her into the backseat, neatly threw him across the backseat. So I'm not sure how that doesn't raise any questions, but regardless. But I did think the visual of it was great because you have that moment where you realize immediately, like, oh my God, something's really wrong here.
Yeah.
And then the mom disposes of it, like you mentioned, in the lake, puts a brick on his chest, doesn't tie the brick to his legs or anything. It's very strange that this actually works to sink the body, but apparently it did. And, but even before then, I guess he shows up before then for sure. So Claire, part of the reason she's shown up at the mom's house, going all the way back to the beginning of the movie, is because she's had a falling out with her boyfriend, throwing away his stuff because he had flirted or cheated on her. And apparently in that bag that she threw away was $10,000 worth of heroin. Is it heroin?
Seems like drugs. It would be. I'm not sure if it was explicitly said.
That this bad guy, Domhnall Gleeson's character, Jackie, had lent, or for some reason, the boyfriend was carrying this. So now they're in hoc to this bad guy. And this is part of the reason that Claire has run off with her boyfriend. There's that really powerful scene, which we could probably dig into a little bit more here, where she is desperate for the money. And of course, earlier on in that one scene, the one scene that he's in, Colin McLaughlin, the former husband, had given her a check for $9,000 to fix the roof of the barn, or of the house, I should say. And of course, that almost covers the money she owes. So I guess she scrounges together full $10,000 and gives Jackie that money to get rid of him. What did you think of the Jackie character of this villain?
I thought he was great. I thought he did a really great job. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought he's fantastic here. It's, really creates a lot of suspense.
Yes.
He's, like a real monster.
But you have a real sense of dread.
You see. Yeah. As the show progresses, the film progresses, there is like you feel like the screws tightening, and you see that he sees himself as a rational person, but that's almost more dangerous that he sees himself that way. And you start, because it's almost like she allows herself to let her guard down a little bit around him. And then you start realizing just how far he's willing to go. And it starts feeling very like she really starts feeling trapped, or you feel that fact that she's trapped as the movie progresses. Yeah, and he does a great job. I thought really good. Well, another key selling points for the film, a really good villain. On the negative side, Sydney Sweeney has that really powerful moment early on, and then she's just ignoring her mom's iMessages for really the vast majority of the movie. She just disappears from this movie, even when they have that confrontation where she finds out where she's staying because she uses the Find My app to track her new phone down. Even when she finds her, it's like she sees her through the mail slot, and then they run away. Even the logistics of that, by the way, are preposterous. Even that was silly because she like sees her there. She sees them trying to run out the back door. She should be like running towards the back door instead of trying to get in through the front door. And then even more silly is that they actually are parked on the streets. So they're like parked right next to her car. And while she's still yelling through the window, they're getting into the car. I'm like, the blocking of these scenes was just very silly. They should have had the car parked behind or something. It just was really silly. And they barely speak to each other. So there's like, that's the one scene where they share space for like a full hour of the movie until the very, very end. And even there, they don't even barely talk to each other. I'm like, did they have Sydney Sweeney for only a few days? Like, what happened here? And of course, dun dun dun. Of course, when she goes and tracks her down, I did like how resourceful she is. Where he has taken all her devices, the mom's devices, is blackmailing her now because he knows that she hid the body or disposed of it. And now, but there is this iPad. The daughter has logged into it, can use that to locate the new device, and also gives her the ability of communicating with her friends. So I did like that. She's pretty resourceful. I mean, as a matter of fact, she comes up with a pretty clever plot here by the end of the movie.
For a grieving woman with
yes.
an addict daughter living on her own, she is sharp as a tack.
She really is. She's a real problem solver, as we've seen earlier, by the way.
Really, so resourceful.
What did you think of? I mean, like the movie is, despite the fact that it has this real mystery and this plot, let's talk a little bit about the character. What do you think about the way that they developed her character? You see her with the daughter. I liked that scene where they go out to the lake earlier on and they're trying to reconnect with her daughter again, trying to reconnect with the experiences they had when they were younger. She has this really like a physical sense memory of waking up and her wife being there, and then waking up and realizing that she's not there, which was a really powerful moment very early in the episode.
Yes.
She wakes up under the blankets, and that was a really traumatizing scene. She imagines herself at the bottom of the lake for a moment. And then, of course, we also see the character development where she goes and meets with her friends, the Fiona Shaw character and her girlfriend or wife. I don't know what the relationship is, but that through that, we really get a pretty rich understanding of the life she's been leading in this rural area. And also, of course, that part of the contentious relationship she has with her ex-husband is probably this as well. It seems that she met her future wife as a boarder on their farm, maybe someone who helped around the farm. And of course, that might have happened while they were still married. So that might have been part of the strain there in the marriage.
I loved the scenes with her and her friend Les, Fiona Shaw. I thought it was really illustrating the depth of their friendship. The scene of them dancing to Dancing on My Own was fantastic. I thought all of that was great.
Yeah, it's like in the middle of this, and it kind of goes back to that Mare of Easttown tempo as well, that in the middle of the thriller elements as well, there's all this character development as we saw in that series, as too. The only issue, like I said before, is that maybe these things needed a little more room to breathe, because once he's on the farm and has like cut her off from all her devices, this really becomes much more of a straight up thriller.
Yeah.
And the suspense is there. I mean, there's a real tension there.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's that great scene where he has that, his eyeglass case with the heroin needle in it. We don't know what it is, but she seems to know it's coming, and he drugs her. And more, I actually didn't like the visual representation of that, where they're kind of moving at two different speeds. But I did like.
I was wondering what you would think about that.
Yeah, I didn't really love that. It seems like I mean, it doesn't seem that necessary. It seems like it's there just to draw attention to itself, which I'm never a huge fan of because they're doing this cool thing. Visually, it's like, striking that they did that. But I do wonder, like, what does that represent even? Because it never is like she gets to have the experience that her daughter has and like how
Right.
maybe we think about, like, from her perspective, how she's like, oh, I understand given what she's going through, how the escape has an allure to it. It literally is. He wakes her up and goes, "Hey, I only give you 200 milligrams.
Yeah.
You're acting like I gave you some mega dose or something. You got to wake up." So basically, what it is he gives it to her. She's knocked out for a couple hours, and then he wakes her up. I'm like, well, if there's no additional purpose to that scene, it seems like it's drawing a lot of attention to itself, just to be. I don't know. I'm not sure what just to say that they did it rather than having some kind of character, but it could have been.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually did think as it's happening, I'm like, oh my God, she gets to experience the escape her daughter seems to be seeking, but it doesn't seem to pay off in any way later on.
I wondered about that too. And from a technical perspective, it's not in keeping with the feel of the movie,
Right. Absolutely
right?
not.
Like the rest of the movie is very realistic. So it seemed strange to not carry that theme through at least one or two more times if
Right.
you wanted to do that type of thing. And this is another nitpick type thing. I had texted you when I was watching the scene that leads up to that saying it's completely unrealistic that neither of these people have guns. You know,
Right.
she is absolutely the demographic for a responsible gun owner. And having experienced what she's experienced in the last few days, I find it hard to believe that she would ever be very far from her gun.
Yeah, and I responded, but it's like it's very common when you own a farm. You could imagine you're just in the woods, going after one of your animals, and you come upon a rabid dog or something, or a rabid wolf or some creature that you have to put down or at least intimidate with a gunshot, just for your own protection. And of course, inevitably, unfortunately, in her line of work, if you have to put a horse down at some point, well,
Hmm.
what are you going to do? Just going to have it,
Yeah.
I'm going to call somebody to take care of this and have the lame animal like lay in the forest for hours waiting for someone to show up. Like no farmer would not carry a shotgun with them.
And on the other side of that dynamic, drug dealers are kind of known for having guns.
Especially in Philly, right? I mean, like if this is a truly just a rural drug dealer, maybe he can get away on intimidation alone. But if he is normally, they are holed up in Philadelphia. It looks like. So if he's actually normally in there, I can't imagine he wouldn't carry a gun at some point. He doesn't need a gun, though, to be honest. Like, I can understand him not showing up on the farm. Let's say he has a gun. He doesn't show up on the farm to intimidate her with a weapon, because that, of course, if he's really savvy, he knows that would potentially be additional charges for him if, things turn bad. And does he really need a gun to intimidate her? I'm much more on board with the whole fact that how does she not have a gun? Just tell him to get off her property.
I mean, and in that particular situation, having already been threatened by him, I would be bringing that gun with me everywhere I went.
Yep. Although, of course, then he kind of has her dead to rights. So at that point, I still buy the blackmail, right? Because she's afraid of things could go bad for her. Obviously, things could go bad for her daughter. If she ends up in jail, her daughter's probably going to go down an addiction rabbit hole even worse than she is now. So in both cases, she really doesn't have much option. She needs to get out of this situation. And of course, we watch very cleverly. Two things happen. We see her being manipulated by him. And she had heard earlier that she's actually wearing the t-shirt of this farm, that there was
Yes.
a farmer who became demented and wanted to kill himself and burn down the farm at the same time. So the insurance claim would come in, and he was suffering from dementia and didn't want to suffer through that and didn't want his family to deal with it. So it was a way for him to get out of jail free in a way and avoid the suicide clause on his insurance policy. Another suicide clause in insurance policy, by the way, speaking of another show we just covered here on the podcast recently. I won't spoil what that is, considering maybe people aren't watching both. But because of that, he came up with a way where he could get the hay to Oftentimes, hay will self-ignite because it's self-insulating. The temperature gets to a certain level, catches fire. And apparently you can use a flare to cover your own tracks, but they found part of the flare left behind, and that's why they caught him. So she is hearing all this, and we're thinking right away, oh, that's going to play out. She suggests to him, I can burn down the barn and collect $100,000 in insurance, and that'll get you $100,000 in money. He makes a valid claim, by the way, earlier on when she says, I have no money. He's like, you have a farm, you have this property, you have this house. So it is once again, an interesting unexplored dynamic that it's almost like a cultural argument that's happening that the daughter in a way could be having with the mother, where the mother's like, I have nothing.
Yeah.
And the younger person who truly has nothing is like, what are you talking about? Like, if you sold this farm and gave up this horse ranching and you just bought a small house in town, you probably could live off the money, but you're not going to do that. You want it to stay the same as before. So this is an actually very interesting dynamic, once again, unexplored, but he's saying there's no way you have all this and you can't somehow make some money out of it. So she comes up with the idea, of course, suggested from that earlier conversation, to burn down the barn, collect the $100,000 claim, and I'll even give you some of the money. He's like, well, how would I get the money? I don't want to be here when the investigation is going on. So she's like, well, I'll just wire it to you as if you were my employee. I'll put you on the books. Which all of this, once again, this is incredibly clever plotting on her part.
Yes.
All of this is part of a very complex setup that she's putting in place
Yes.
here. Anything else you want to say before we will get to the actual resolution of the story here, if you don't have anything else to add?
No, just the scheme of this is very impressive, especially when you find out what really happened.
Yeah. And then so the big finale, for anybody who wants this spoiled and is not going to watch this film, the big finale at the end, after it looks like she has burned down the barn. And by the way, my biggest concern there wasn't even the barn burning down. I didn't even care about that. I was like, they can't kill those horses.
I know. I was really shocked by that. And I am not even an animal person, but it was heartbreaking, the idea that they were going to burn not only her horses, but
All the horses.
horses who were boarding there.
Yeah. Yeah. She even brings it up. She goes, well, he's like, how much can I get for the horses if we kill the horses too? And she's like, well, most of my horses are just boarding. It's like, well, which ones are yours? So she's like, I only have two of them. So it's not even like she's going to burn her, like you said, not even going to burn just her two horses, which of course she would get money from her insurance claim. But all the horses, I'm like, oh my God, you can't kill all those horses.
I know. Oh.
And then the way they cut the show, by the way, I was like, once he drove away, I'm like, well, at least she rescued the horses. And then it looked like the horses die.
It did look that way.
So I was thinking, well, she probably couldn't free the horses, even though he was gone, because that would be suspicious, right? The fire starts at 2:00 in the morning and the horses got away, but the barn burned down. Okay, all this looks really suspicious. Anyway, so then it all ends. The police show up, they put the fire out, they start asking questions, and they start asking her about the fire. The fire looks a little suspicious. And they're like, we found part of the flare. And I'm like, oh my God, I guess she didn't correctly know what part of the flare gets left behind because she left it behind anyway. So a mistake. And now, how's she going to get out of this circumstance? But it turns out it's all this elaborate setup. She has, through the iPad, been in communication with Jess, her friend. He has been living in the barn to keep an eye on her. They have gone to the lake and found the body. She didn't find it before, but she now found it with a flashlight in the middle of the night. They've returned the body of this. Oh, by the way, never explained what the body was. The body was not the boyfriend, by the way. The body that which kind of knew right away that wasn't going to be the case. Turns out it is just some kid who was a drug dealer who got his hands on as a bad dose of heroin and OD'd. And anyway, this is a story we hear from the villainous character. The villainous character actually, we should talk about that for a minute because that's pretty messed up. He had told the couple that they're like, hey, how are we going to get rid of this body? I'm not taking the blame for this. It was your boyfriend, his stupidity of cutting the heroin badly with the fentanyl. And they're like, I'm going to drive her to my mother's house and she'll take care of it. and they like mock her. They're like, "Can you believe it?
Mhm.
She actually did it." That
Ah,
is, I mean, seeing those messages from the daughter, it really feels like, is there any coming back from this relationship? Again, another thing that they needed, I think, to make that a little bit harder for the daughter to like be back in her good graces. But yes, the body is back. It is this kid who OD'd. She's found his of social media presence earlier when she found out what his name was. So she knew that at least part of the story is true. But they put the body into the barn in the loft where he was staying, which was also the wife's loft previously. So it's a way, once again, symbolically, when she burns down the barn, she's also burned all those things. So it's kind of a way for her to move forward. But the body is found in there, and he immediately is just like, wait, I see what's happening here. I'm going to flip the script here. And it's just like, nope, you were seen on the barn. You say you don't even know who this woman is. You received money from her. And then all these little dominoes fall into place. And I'm like, oh my God, she's been setting up this whole time. She's going to burn down the barn, put the body in there. And of course, they did, her friends were there hiding on the property. And as soon as he took off, they rescued all the horses. So even the horses got away.
and amazing too that even though he told her to cancel all her writing lessons, she texted the one friend, "Hey, come pick up your saddle," or
Yeah.
whatever it
Mm-hmm.
was.
Yeah.
And so there was a witness to the fact that he had been working there.
You know what though? That is an absolutely valid point, but the I guess you would have to delete that. I was going to say the one thing that she could have him, which I do like how these shows don't know. And speaking of another show we covered here as well, don't know how to deal with technology. They did cleverly use technology with her iPad as a way for her to communicate nefarious, like where he didn't know what was going on behind his back. So that was clever that she's always thinking, well, there's got to be some way I can communicate. And that was a good point that she figured that out. But I found it very funny that the Ring camera, like unless he's deleting all of her cloud recordings, the Ring camera has all those recordings. So when he's at the door, maybe the conversation at the door where he's like, "I know you killed that kid," maybe she wants to delete that conversation. But I'm pretty sure that Ring camera, when he was on the property for days at a time, the Ring camera has him walking in and out of that door all the time. So if they were saying like, "Oh, he says he never met you," I'm like, well, here's 200 Ring camera, probably like 10 seconds each, but like hundreds, 100 times where he walked in front of that camera over the course of those 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, so I'm not as familiar with how the Ring camera works, but I totally take your word for it. But I did question that the barn doesn't have some kind of camera
Yeah.
of cars entering and exiting the property that would have picked up all that activity the night of the fire.
Yeah. You got to figure kids, I mean, will just, can imagine just causing mischief on the
Right,
property.
exactly.
If she got a Ring camera on her front door, totally understandable why she would. Especially if she goes away and she's like receiving a package or someone rings the doorbell or one of her clients comes by and goes like, "Oh, I just needed to pick up this." And she's like, "Oh, I'm actually away for the weekend, but hey, go to the barn. It's over there." Right. So you can imagine that she needs that utility there. And if you are away for a week and nobody's on the property because she's a single woman that without a family or, a husband or any spouse at all, then you need to have cameras there. So yeah. Once again, very suspicious that there's
Yeah.
no camera available. I mean, as far as this investigation goes, I do find it very funny that she had like 2 tons of like hay delivered the day that the barn burned down. Whoops! What a coincidence! Enough fuel to burn down the entire barn, and it just came today. Yeah, but I do like how she pulls. After she suffered so much, this poor woman, I do find it really satisfying how she
Agree.
reversed this full reversal by the end. Yeah, so it gives you a satisfying closure to this poor woman's plight.
Well, there's not complete closure because of the last scene.
Oh, because the daughter shows up, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess that is supposed to be. I think we're supposed to read that as that is the closure of her like coming back and asking for forgiveness. But yeah, is this just going to be another
Starting the cycle again,
Does it start over
possibly.
again? Does
Or
she have to kill somebody else? Maybe that's why she's so good at this in the first place. How many times has she had to kill
the
people?
sequel.
How many people out there are arrested for something that happened on the barn? It's the way she actually keeps the place afloat is by framing other people for insurance policy fraud across the property. How do you read the those final moments?
I think it really was a crossroads of whether she's going to start this cycle again or this is the time that she's going to cut her daughter off like her ex-husband said she has to.
I mean, but can you? That's the thing. I mean, maybe that's the
The
philosophical question that's
ex-husband
being
did
asked.
it.
Yeah, true.
People
Yeah,
do. People do all the time with their addict children because partly there is a school of thought that says that's what you must do. And partly because they've already gone through so much pain that they can't bear it anymore.
I'd have to say that maybe that's the other thing the film could have been better at is having a lack of ambiguity in reading those final scenes. Because when you see her after, her barn is being rebuilt. So she's going to collect this insurance claim. She needed the money, so she'll have some extra money to maybe fix her roof finally. But not only that, you see her, she seems to be more engaged with the training of the girls riding the horses. And you see that even the soundtrack seems to be indicating that she has found some, having control here has given her some additional modicum of power. So I do think we're supposed to read that at the end as a satisfying reunion. But yeah, you could very easily have had that final scene be like, uh-oh, here we go again.
I don't even agree that we're supposed to read it as a satisfying reunion. I think it is supposed to be an open-ended question.
Yeah. So I mean, I didn't read it that way, but I think I see your point though, because I mean, of course, there is the inevitable. This has happened before, right? I mean, not exactly this. Let's be. I mean, the daughter disappearing and then turning up has happened before. So, and
Yeah,
that boyfriend is still
making
out
your
there.
mom assist you in a murder cover-up, though, not so much.
Maybe it was. Maybe that's what that voicemail was.
Or not even a murder cover-up, right? An accidental overdose, but
Right. Well, at the final scene is her listening to the voicemail of the wife and the
right.
daughter, right? So it's again like this connecting to this nostalgia of the past, which of course understandable considering she just lost her spouse.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this could have been even better, I think, but pretty satisfying. If anybody liked this movie, I have two recommendations that I highly recommend, and one is Beast, directed by the same director and written by the same director, Michael Pierce, I believe his name is, British director, and it's fantastic, and I think it's very easy to find. It's the one with Jesse Buckley, as I mentioned before. The other one is a movie called Mother from Bong Joon-ho. This is a few years before he made Parasite, and another psychological thriller. And in this case, there's a son who has mental problems, and he's been arrested for a murder, and the mom goes to visit him. And I would say, like Bong Joon-ho likes to do with his movies, with these tone shifts, the film feels very slapstick at the beginning. And then this older mother who's doting on her son is trying to unravel this murder mystery, very almost slapstick at points. And all I'll say is that where this movie ends, it is like so shocking, and it is such a satisfying twist, but it is not a twist where you can't believe the plot went there. It's the type of twist where it's all character driven and you can't believe you've been betrayed by this character to some extent. And I'm being very vague about this, but I'd say that it's like, if you want to see like the extent of a mother's love for their child and how maybe that's not always the mentally healthy thing, depending on the extremes you're willing to go to. It is a really true, interesting, really fascinating psychological, profile. And again, this one's relatively easy to find as well. I think it was on Netflix for a long time. I think it's on Hulu now. But I think all of Bong Joon-ho's films are easily to stream, given his success with Parasite. And I think this one's not as broadly seen as Parasite and some of his other films. So definitely check that out. So if this is intriguing to you, two better films. This is still, I think, fun, but do check out those other films, which I think are both really deal with a lot of the same psychological terrain, and I think more satisfyingly. Do you have any recommendations other than Gone Girl? I mean, in the vein of this film.
Oh gosh, I hadn't thought about it at the time. I just finished watching it a couple of hours ago. So I don't. The one reference that came to mind as I was watching this, which is got nothing to do with the themes here, but that scene of Kate and Les dancing on my own reminded me of a really great scene in the show Girls with Lena
Girls,
Dunham.
yes.
Yeah, where she dances to the same song. And then, we talked about how our mind gets distracted. I started thinking about how Girls was such a great show. And I think Lena
Yeah,
Dunham has something new coming out soon. And I wonder how that will be. So,
yeah.
for anyone who hasn't seen Girls, it really is brilliant, but it's nothing like this movie. So,
I have been over and over again. Maybe this is an excuse just because you brought it up again. I've been wanting to see Girls, and I watched. We've discussed there in a podcast. I think I saw the first season and a half, maybe full 2 seasons. Loved season one. I think the show started losing me a little bit in season two. My wife was watching it the whole time. So I would dip in and see an episode here and there because she was still watching it. But I never really completed. I definitely did not complete it. I didn't watch anything towards the end, but I missed a lot after season two, I'd say. So
well,
maybe I need
I
to go
will
back.
say, okay, I found a way to bring it back on theme.
There you go.
Just as maybe my experience of watching this movie was a little bit different than your experience because of what resonates with me, with my experiences dealing with people with addiction. Girls, I think, as much as I hate things being gendered and boys like this and girls like that, I think Girls really resonates for those who have experienced being a 20-something woman, which, you have not. So, so I do think there is a bit of a gender split, quite possibly, in how you receive that show.
But I mean, I completely agree with that. And there's obviously, I think things can be gendered in the way you view them because it's all based on your personal life experiences for sure. But I really truly loved season one of that
Yeah.
show. And I think it started to lose me a little bit as it progressed. And some of that was, there was some behind the scenes where there was the pressure to put out a certain number of episodes and on at a certain cadence. Now you take 2 or 3 years off between shows, no problem. But back
Right.
then it was like she needed to, as soon as the show blew up, she needed to immediately start producing more show. I mean, there was issues with the production of the show. And I don't know. I just think that since then, there really hasn't been, like, that was kind of the end of an era of that type of show. We still don't see that now, even. We don't really see somebody who makes a show very personal to them, very much like one creative voice. Now it's all like these giant franchises and they all have to be genre shows. And there's really not much of that. So just for the fact that it's kind of the end of a certain era, maybe I need to go back and give it another chance and kind of see the best of it rather than the things that irritated me about it.
Fair. Yeah, I'm going to think about that. What is a modern day Girls? Yeah, I'm going to think about that.
Well, we might have one this year, by the way. Here's a little teaser for things to come. I just watched. Do you know Rachel Sennett? Do you know the actress?
I know the name, but I can't really link the name to anything.
She was in. She wrote. She's a writer as well. She wrote one of the co-writers of a movie called Bottoms that came out a couple of years ago
Yeah,
that
I
did
heard
pretty
that was
well.
good.
Yeah, it's funny. And she also did Shiva Baby, which is on HBO Max, a very low budget movie with the same actress who plays Carmi's girlfriend is another one of the main players in there.
Huh.
So they
Okay.
kind of came up through that movie, shot in New York, a very low budget production. And she's been on she's up and coming. She was on Bodies, 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 another big movie
Okay.
from a few years back. Anyway, so she has a new series coming to Max that was supposed to come out this summer. I actually had that penciled in for me and you, Sona, to watch for the very reason that it is basically pitched as this is like this generation's girls. And so I thought that that could be something we definitely should check out. But I think it's been pushed to the fall. So we have to wait to the fall for that. But it's coming. And we do have the new Lena Dunham show coming as well. Too Much, I think it's called. All right, Sona. Thank you again for the conversation. Next week. Oh, do you have you watched the 28 Days, Weeks movies?
No, I don't like zombies.
No zombies. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so I was just curious. That's coming next week. So that is we'll be covering here on the podcast at some point. I don't know. Like maybe we'll see. We'll see what we can talk about next week. Or else otherwise we will regroup in 2 weeks to talk about the bear. Definitely going to talk about the bear.
Great. And I hope you have a happy Father's Day.
Thank you. Thank you. And hope you enjoy your time with your family during Father's Day as well.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks. I'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.